In the quiet town of Okari, where family names carried weight and traditions spoke louder than individual pain, lived a woman named Nkiru Okafor. She was known as a gentle wife, respectful, hardworking, and soft-spoken. When she married Obinna Okafor, the only son of the Okafor family, the entire village celebrated with dancing, cannon shots, and overflowing plates of food. Everyone believed children would come quickly, but they did not. 1 year passed, then 2. By the 3rd year, Nkiru could no longer pretend she did not hear the whispers. By the 4th year, the whispers became open words, sharp and deliberate, mostly from her sisters-in-law. The women in the village had started gossiping. "I heard she lived a wayward life and has aborted all the children in her womb," one of them asked loudly one afternoon while pounding fufu. "Or maybe she doesn't have a womb," another replied. Nkiru heard everything. She always did. She cried a lot while continuing her cooking. In Okari, a married woman's worth was often measured by the sound of children running around her compound. Nkiru's compound remained quiet. Obinna loved his wife deeply, but pressure followed him everywhere. As the only son, he carried the burden of the Okafor lineage. His late father's name, the ancestral land, the family title, all rested on his shoulders. One day, his sisters called him to the room and asked, "Is our brother's seed weak?" one of them asked loudly. "No," another replied, "it is the woman, a clay pot that cannot hold water." The other said, "She is a witch and cannot give birth to children. Obinna must marry another wife that will bear him children. Amara is the one Obinna must marry. She will bear children immediately." The elders also called him aside during meetings. "My son," they said, "a tree without branches will soon wither." The weight became unbearable. One morning, Obinna told Nkiru he was traveling to another state for work. Nkiru nodded and said nothing. She packed his bag carefully, ironed his clothes, and prayed silently as she watched him leave. What Nkiru didn't know was that he had planned with his sisters to abandon her in the house, go to another city, get a new wife, then travel abroad with her. When his car disappeared down the dusty road, the house felt emptier than ever. Though far away, she stayed in touch with Obinna. She called often to ask him how he is and how his work. Meanwhile, Obinna lived his life in the new city. He carried different women. He will not also allow Nkiru to come visit him. But then, even while Nkiru was along, Obinna's sisters did not stop. They increased their visits, inspecting her cooking, her cleaning, even her body. They called her a witch and said she needs prayers. A few hinted her that Obinna would take another wife. One evening, after a particularly painful encounter, Nkiru locked herself in her room and cried until her chest hurt. That night, she made a decision that frightened her but also gave her courage. She would go and see her husband. She called Obinna and told him, "I want to come to where you are," she said quietly. He hesitated at first, surprised, but he agreed. When Nkiru arrived in the other state, seeing Obinna again stirred emotions they had both buried. They talked for hours about the marriage, the pressure, the shame, the fear of disappointing their families, and the love that still refused to die. That night, with tears in her eyes and humility in her voice, Nkiru pleaded. "My husband," she said, kneeling slightly as tradition demanded. "Let us not give up. Please, let us try again." Obinna looked at her, the woman who had endured insults and silence without bitterness, and his heart softened. They came together as husband and wife, holding on to hope one last time. A few days later, Nkiru returned home quietly. 1 month passed. She called Obinna as usual. "How are you?" he asked. Nkiru hesitated. "I have been feeling weak," she said. "My body is hot and I feel dizzy." Obinna suggested she go to the hospital. "It might just be malaria," Nkiru replied quickly. She was afraid of hoping again. But after a few days, she gathered courage and went. At the hospital, the nurse looked at her test results and smiled. "Madam," she said, "congratulations, you are pregnant." Nkiru's legs nearly failed her. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she clutched the paper. 4 years of waiting ended in that moment. She rushed home and called Obinna immediately.
I'm pregnant.
Pregnant?
"I
Really?
am
Yes,
pregnant,"
we're having a baby.
she said,
Wow, this is
her
incredible.
voice shaking. There was silence on the line. Then Obinna spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you sure?" "Yes." That joy was short-lived but powerful. Obinna told her to book the next available flight and come to him immediately. He was traveling abroad in 2 days. When Nkiru arrived, Obinna wasted no time. He took her straight to the hospital. In their culture, certainty was important, especially with family pressure involved. The pregnancy was confirmed. The paternity was confirmed. Everything was clear. Nkiru stayed with him for those 2 precious days. On the day Obinna traveled abroad, she stood at the airport and watched him leave, her heart full of hope. Still, Obinna did not inform his sisters. He wanted peace for his wife and protection for their unborn child. From abroad, he kept his promise. "I will arrange your papers," he told her. "You will come and meet me." 6 months later, Nkiru traveled to the United Kingdom, 7 months pregnant. It was her first time leaving Nigeria. The cold air shocked her, but her heart felt warm. For the first time in years, she lived without insults, whispers, or judgment. In a clean hospital far from Umuokori, Nkiru gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Obinna wept openly when he held his son. Years later, Nkiru gave birth again to a girl this time, and later still another boy. 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. The compound that once echoed with silence now overflowed with laughter. When Nkiru eventually returned to Nigeria for visits, the same sisters-in-law who mocked her now greeted her with respect. "Nunye Ani!" They called her our wife. Nkiru smiled and responded with grace, not bitterness. She had learned that waiting does not mean rejection, and silence does not mean failure. In the end, the woman once labeled Barren became a living testimony. And in Umuokori, her story was told for years, not as a tale of shame, but as a lesson in patience, endurance, and the quiet strength of a Nigerian woman.